Morning, everyone. We're going to call the Community Service section of the Coordinated Committee meeting to order. I have no disclosure of pecuniary interest. If anyone has one as we go through the meeting, please bring it to my attention.
Sorry, I think we're using a new process, so I should be declaring the one for Public Works now. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you. And we'll be participating in all other areas.
You have to read it.
Yeah, you have to read it. Oh, you have to read it, okay. Just the bottom portion of the whole thing. Okay. So one pecuniary interest related to check 21158 as it pertains to a family member. And the Deputy Mayor will be voting on all of the matters. We have no deputations and petitions. Oh, we have one, sorry, my apologies. Mr. Fred Mogulin. Correct. If you could come to the table, that would be great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, Your Worship, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I come today before you to seek remedy from a section of the bylaw, the firearms bylaw, to allow me to do what every kid and teenager at camp enjoys doing, and that is the sport of archery. I have a property within the town of Wasaga that is uniquely positioned to allow me to do this. I have all of the neighbors' approval because their backyards all face my property. Some of them are elderly and don't even use their backyards, but I took the time and trouble to go and talk to them, tell them about my sport, and they're supportive, some enthusiastically supportive. So my ultimate goal here today is to convince you that my experience in the practice of this sport, which goes over many years, including teaching those kids at camp, that I can get a letter of exemption which would hold me only specifically and my property only specifically free from the tenets of this bylaw. You have a clause in the bylaw that makes this an option in the form of a letter of exemption. So my request is to allow me to practice the sport of archery on my property with safety as a chief objective. To do this without contravening the bylaw, which includes any bow as a firearm, I seek this letter of exemption as provided for in the bylaw. My bow and arrows are handmade. I make them, and do not have hunting tips. My neighbors are all aware of my hobby and I have their unanimous support. This is the second year I have made this request and hope my perseverance is seen as a serious attempt to satisfy any concerns or questions members of council and this committee may have. Nothing of my proposed practice area is visible or near any road or public walkway. I would be happy to incorporate any restrictions council's committee may impose, such as permission to practice Sunday mornings only when people are either at church or sleeping in. I thank you for this opportunity to give you my thoughts and my request. If there are any questions at all, I'd be happy to respond.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I guess more of a question for our CAO. Where will this request go from here? And I know that we did hear a presentation last year, and there was concerns raised at that time. So will this go back to staff now and a report come forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, if that was section's wish, there would be a motion brought forward to refer the request to staff for review and recommendation. That's certainly an option.
And
Sorry, go
and I
ahead.
guess that's where I don't want to see it just fall off the table here today. So if it could go back to staff, again, I don't know if fences and all of that was considered last time or not, but I think we need to make a decision and then be done with it. To hear it every single year, I don't think would be productive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the gentleman, if I may, could you just explain to me what a non-hunting tip is? I know last year you had a box of tips and there were some sharp tips and some
Yes.
blunt tips, but specifically a non-hunting tip.
Well, tips are of several types. There is what is called generally in the industry and in the sport a field tip, which is a weighted piece of metal that screws into the front of the arrow, and it has what I would say a benign point. It is designed to pierce the paper target and stick in so that one can count the points one has scored. That's one type of tip. There is a blunt tip, which is like the end of a pen like this. It's bullet shaped, and on occasion when you shoot at the target, that arrow will jump out and drop to the ground. It does leave a mark. This is an arrow that I use. Then there are arrows that the aficionados of hunting use. So you unscrew all of this other type of material and you put on something that looks like, I don't know if you've watched the movie The Wall, but in it there are several archers shooting at great distance into the air to hit the enemy below. And those tips are 3 blades in a triangular pattern. And they will not only stick in, they will go through the target.
So the tips you're talking about, the blunt, the field tips or the blunt tips, this I'm assuming, could this pierce somebody's body?
No. No. They would do what the blunt tip does, that is bounce back off, but I suggest they would leave one hell of a bruise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Mogulin. We saw your presentation last year, and I think it was great that we got to see the arrows and everything.
Thank you.
My concern was at the time was the neighbors. Now, you've told me you have letters of support from the neighbors, or did you talk to them?
At this point, it's verbal. I,
Okay.
as a neighbor, went to see them, saying, this is something I intend to do. Do you have any problems with that? And they all said no, and I took my dog and pony show as I did last year along and showed them the trappings of the sport. And some of them became quite enthusiastic. Couldn't understand why there was a prohibition against it. Because in truth, it's not a firearm. There is no explosion, there is no bullet.
And I know someone else said, I think the deputy mayor suggested to go back to staff, but I would be a little more comfortable if there was something from the neighbors signed that they're okay with this. Just because, you know, neighbors do move, and might be okay this year, but next year if somebody's moved and doesn't appreciate it, it's just like some level of comfort that it was okay with the neighborhood. Immediate neighbors would be fine.
I can do that. I would like an indication of how the committee as a whole would feel about it, because
Yes, appreciate
as
that.
I said, 2 are ladies that are quite elderly, and I don't want to bother the neighbors as such either. I like their support, but I don't want to bug them.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Just to the issue with the neighbors being on board, like the counselor said, people do move, so it would then become something that would have to be reviewed every year. I really think it needs to go back to staff. I think firearms in general we need to be looking at across the board. If we start I remember years ago we had one wanted to shoot a pellet gun, and so there's all these different layers to it, and I think that we need to just be careful that we're not setting a precedent that we'll regret down the road.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Eagle?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that Sunday mornings. Were you interested in just doing Sunday mornings, or is this for all times?
I would accept any conditions that committee might place on my art or my sport. It is an art in a way too.
Mm-hmm.
Including that if you would, I would agree to post a $1,000 surety that no arrow will ever fly off of my property. So there are conditions that the committee can impose on me to restrict any of those concerns that folks may have. I think the vernacular would be, I'm prepared to bend over backwards so that I can do this.
Any additional comments?
Just further, I believe Mr. Moglen's found that one section of the bylaw that he can get special
Yes.
exception, and I think you know he has a case in my feeling for the special exemption, and I would like to refer it back to staff with a recommendation.
Okay. Councillor
Through you,
Stockwell?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question of the CAO, if I may. Through you, what's the procedural bylaw on this type of thing? Once the decision's made, how do you get it back in front of council? I was under the impression that someone who voted with the affirmative had to reverse their vote or something. I haven't looked at the procedural bylaw, and I'm asking you.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, just and subject to the clerk who knows the procedural bylaw better than I do, this matter was dealt with last year, so it's proper to be back here before committee again. Committee's been presented with new information. Committee does not have the authority to exempt. It would have to be a recommendation to council, so council has that authority. This committee makes recommendations. So the process would be, if it was referred back to staff, then it would come back again at the July coordinated committee for consideration with a potential recommendation to the July council.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add further that I'm aware of the special request that I am making and hold it in very high esteem. I want to live in Wasaga within the bylaw. Therefore, I am asking for this exemption. And this exemption, as I mentioned before, would apply to me personally only. It would not allow anyone else to do what I'm doing. And as I suggested, there could be some conditions placed on that in terms of time and frequency and that sort of thing, all of which I would adhere to.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, I have a comment, and I'd like to address my concern to both Doug Vincent, our bylaw officer, and the CAO. The concern I would have is, and I certainly understand you're taking every precaution, and even with a blunt arrow, the fact is that in a freak accident, a blunt arrow can put out an eye. So my question would be that if the appropriate liability insurance was taken out on the part of yourself related to your sport, what is the liability of the municipality if we grant an exception and we had a freak accident? because, you know, we understand that the chances of that happening is a very minute possibility, but at the same time, our taxpayers in the town and our insurance could potentially be impacted. So is there, in the case of an exemption and appropriate insurance is held by the requester, would we be exempt from liability?
You direct.
Well, if either can answer that, or if that has to be referred back, we do have a motion on the table as well.
Mr. Chair, certainly from the standpoint of the insurance, if the matter is referred back to staff, then we can include some comments with respect to insurance. Typically what happens in an insurance matter, first of all, the individual who is obtaining the insurance, part of their insurance certificate is that they are insuring the town as a third party. So there is a requirement that the town be covered under their insurance. So if we're sued, then it's the gentleman's insurance that defends the municipality, and that's fundamental in any kind of insurance where we require. That doesn't necessarily mean that the person's not going to sue the municipality. Typically that's what happens, but in terms of the carriage of the matter, it's the individual's insurance company that carries the matter, so there's minimal expense to the municipality. Council does have the authority under the bylaw to grant an exemption, and if it follows its procedure and process and does that, then if the matter does end up in court, that is a consideration that council has followed its policies. But certainly we can elaborate further if the matter is referred back to staff.
Okay. Yes.
I was aware of this clause in the insurance of the third-party coverage, and so that, along with perhaps a bond posted by me, should cover any of those freak accidents, which would be, I think, no more risky than stepping out in front of a bus.
That's ridiculous.
Okay. With that said, I do have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor by Folke and seconded by Councillor Bray, that request for exemption under the Firearms Bylaw 1999-20 be resolved that the Coordinated Committee refer item 3.1A to staff for review and follow up with a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Section having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor by Folke.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Opposed?
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
One opposed.
Thank you very much.
So 1 opposed. Thank you.
I thank you very much. I await your direction.
Thank you.
Okay, unfinished business, I believe we have none. So we did receive notice from the OPP that they were not available to attend this morning, but is there any questions related to the OPP report? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I just had some questions about the stats, because in all the reports they seem to be lower than they were last year. And I'm just wondering how that affects our income based on the court judgments that we get. So it just seems a little too low for me that compared to the year before on some of these reports. And that's what I'm saying about that.
Were there any other comments? I just would like to add the same thing. Obviously there may be a modest impact on revenue, but my concern was related specifically to traffic violations, where the drop seems inconsistent with most other things that are occurring, and that if we're establishing a pattern where traffic violations are not being detected, and we're having a pattern of behavior that long-term could impact the safety of our residents. I was talking to the CAO, and he indicated that they have a dedicated two-man team on traffic. But previous to that was everybody more diligent related to traffic offenses, and now they've left it up to two people. I'm not assuming what the impacts were, but I would, I guess I question whether the drop is just, greatly improved behavior on the part of drivers over one season. But yes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear what you're saying. However, I would say that I drive through this town probably too many times each day, and I can tell you that I see the traffic units pulling people over. They're active, that's for darn sure. Perhaps this could be, and it'd be good to have the OPP here to answer that, so I agree that they need to start coming to our meetings, send somebody who can speak to the report. But this could also very well be just an action thereof, that people are aware that they're on the streets and they're watching, and things are getting better. So that wouldn't be a bad thing. Monetarily, maybe not so good, but from a safety standpoint, probably a good thing. So I think what it comes down to, Mr. Chair, is the OPP needs to start sending a representative, somebody, to come and speak to us.
George, our CO, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the report and the page dealing with traffic-related charges, and the portion of the report dealing with April. When I see the column and it's all zeros, that I'm thinking that there must have been a typo or some entry error with respect to that, because when every category, speeding, seatbelt impaired, distracted, for the month of April, everything is at 0. There must have been an entry error, or just something that wasn't put in properly. So I could certainly seek some clarification from the detachment on that to see, what that, if that is actually correct as it's presented.
Just to comment on that, the zeros in the month occurs on a regular basis. I believe they explained at one point in time that they don't update the month fast enough to get it in. So my references were to the year to date.
Oh, I see.
But again, and I'd also like to point out that in several meetings they had indicated that they had significant concerns in Clearview, and that for a period of time they were putting much more resources into the Clearview area. So again, it would be great to be updated on that, because if they are addressing other areas of the region and not giving the same attention to Wasaga Beach, then we'd like at some point to hear a plan. So CO would then to communicate back to OPP about our expectation of have some representation here on a regular basis. Is that, who does that fall to?
Mr. Chair, certainly I can look after that, and the detachment commander and the operations sergeant both sent their regrets. Both of them are on training, and just coincidentally, so they were aware of the request to come today. It's just coincidental, but I'll reinforce that back.
Okay, just and just to point out, other than the appointment of the new commander, I believe that they've missed 3 out of the last 4 coordinated committees, so this is not an isolated case. With that said, we have a motion moved by Councillor Stockwell and seconded by Councillor Smith. Resolved that the Community Service section of the Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the April 2017 Huronia West Police Services Board report for information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Blythe-Bolchy.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor.
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Belanger?
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, the next order of business is the Fire Department Monthly Report. Chief McWilliams.
Close. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I brought Williams with me.
Oh, sorry, McWilliams.
And I noticed when they said Chief Williams, he was.
I want to point out that the chief does the work of 3 men, so that's why
So he
we're
just
all
hired
set.
3 different names for me. I'll go with that. Thank you. The fire crews responded to 138 calls for service in the month of May. The May 2-4 weekend, 26 calls were related to that weekend. And we look at that weekend time frame from 5 p.m. on Friday through to 5 p.m. on the Monday. So 26 calls is a pretty low volume for that time period. And then further to that, we break down the calls and look at what was actually directly related to the weekend. So whether it's at our accommodations or beachfront or something like that, and there was only 15 calls that related to that weekend. So as it goes, that's a pretty quiet May 2-4 weekend for us. We did have a structure fire during the weekend at 1264 River Road West. That was a year-round resident, so again, not related to weekend visitors. It was a relatively minor fire. It was a good response. We had the crew down from Station 2. We had some other staff doing some training at Station 1, so it was located very close to Station 1. So we made a quick response, quick knockdown, limited the fire to the kitchen area. Our investigation was kind of inconclusive. We did narrow it down to a smoking incident or a slight possibility that could be electrical involved, but it was hard to determine exactly what caused that fire. So it was accidental. Nobody home at the time of the fire. Nobody was hurt, civilian or fire personnel. We of course we work with electric elements when they come in and put on their show, and it's quite an extensive inspection process to make sure that the stage is inspected properly and all the vendors that come in. The deputy and I were down on the Saturday after the structure fire, inspected their site, had no issues with them whatsoever, and they had very little incidents within the event for as far as medical. I believe the stats were sent to council. So again, from our perspective, that's not a big concern. Last weekend we're into the season of prom parties, and our accommodations are filling up with these kids in the prom parties. We did have an overcrowding incident last weekend. The deputy attended early Sunday morning with bylaw, OPP, and since then, this week we've had a meeting, and we're going to be addressing that particular accommodation and dealing with them directly. However, we're going to reissue a letter that we issued a number of years ago to all the accommodation owners, letting them know what the fire code says and exactly how many people they're allowed to have in their sleeping areas. So they're adding extra beds to cottages. They're just piling people in, and the code just clearly says that's not acceptable. So it's difficult to police this because, well, we can't police it. We can't be there when they go to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's up to the accommodation owner to have the appropriate security on site and make sure that they're staying within code. So it is time for a reminder for those owners, and then this one in particular, we'll be dealing with it directly. It would be more than just the letter. So, and that's all I had for today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there any questions? I think Councillor Smith was first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regard to those over the limit accommodations, what do you do? Do you send some of the kids home, or what's the enforcement, or is it just a penalty? I just wondered what the ramifications were.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we have to take immediate action to make sure that we can't say, well, after this weekend, then you have to rectify. So we have to take immediate, and those kids have to be removed. So they have to go back down to what that sleeping area, or that cottage and number of sleeping areas is designed for.
And is there any fine through bylaw to, is there any fines?
Yeah, there are fines through that process, bylaw, as well as us. We can issue fines as well. So.
Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was made aware of this incident. It was quite a large incident, actually. A lot of OPP involved, and fire, and paramedic, and bylaw, and this particular property is not. This isn't an uncommon issue here. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the chief is, what are the fines under the fire code that could be laid, and are you planning to move forward with that?
Actually, I'll let you speak to. Come on up.
And if while we're waiting there, Mr. Chair, for me to add to that, what about recouping costs? Is that something that we can do as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. The cost, and that goes through our bylaw. So Doug will be issuing that, and then I'll let the deputy speak to the fines as far as it relates to the fire department, because he wrote the inspection order and he was on site that day. I was not. So as far as fines, yeah.
Sure. So there was a variety of different fire code and building code violations that were determined through the investigation process on the Sunday morning. Just as an example, anything from the occupancy issue to non-operational smoke alarms, fire extinguisher was missing, unauthorized burning happening on the property within the fire pit. There was a series, a long list. So we have a couple of options. We have prepared inspection orders, which will be served upon the property owner. We do have the option as well of laying Part 1 or Part 3 tickets. Our charges, the difference being a Part 1 charge is a ticket similar to a Highway Traffic Act offense. If you got pulled over by the police, they would on the spot issue you a ticket. We do have the option of doing that, or we could lay a Part 3 charge, which would mean we would essentially bring the person to court, provide our evidence in front of a judge, and the judge could determine what the consequence would be financially for that individual. Through speaking with Doug Vincent, we also need to have a look at the business license and determine whether there was enough violations that we found to revoke the business license and ensure that this type of operation doesn't continue. So we are still in the sort of the investigative process to determine what is the best next step.
Councilor Gray?
So just a comment, plum parties happen once a year every year, so I don't know if we're working quickly to prevent it, but they've been happening for the 10 years I've been here, and obviously they're getting worse, or enforcement is getting a little bit better, but I think we need a longer term solution, not just 3 weeks from now it'll be over and we'll be into summer. So.
Councilor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to the fire chief and deputy. I just was wondering if this is a case, I don't know how many they were over and what have you, but it sounds like the perfect case is that we don't do the most we can to send a message out to others by giving them the full charge, and to send a message out to other cottage courts or wherever that it's just not acceptable anymore. So,
Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important. Councillor Bray makes a very good point that these prom parties have been happening for 10 years and they can be problematic. But I live on a street where it's nothing but prom parties, and I can tell you and I'm going to knock on wood because this weekend will be a nightmare now for me, I'm sure, as I'm about to say this. But it's been very, very quiet. There's been no issues. We have an operator has a building directly beside my house that is got a prom kids there, and they're having fun, but by 11 o'clock it's quiet as a mouse. And so this is clearly a case in all cases where the property owner has to make $1, and we get that, but you need to control your tenants, and whether they be prom kids or, I mean, this happens in the middle of the summer where these places get overcrowded, or they get a group of people in there that just don't want to respect our community, and the owners need to be in control and have proper security on site, so on and so forth. So I would like to see a regular report come back to Councillor Bray's point, where we're really looking at this in its totality. A report coming back through the chief on a monthly basis to say, okay, here's our issues that we've had, motels, hotels, cottage courts, whatever, throughout the season. So is that we'll get a clearer picture as to, are there problem areas, are there problem operators, is there a larger problem or not, and then we can have a real good look at how we might want to deal with that. But again, no issues on my street till next weekend now, I'm sure, but a report on that would be a good option. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, here to the committee. So you're right, it's not a new issue. However, we have addressed it in years past. It has improved. And then we'll have an accommodation owner that might be good 1 year and we don't hear from anybody, and then they're back on the table the next year. So we're continuing to try and make improvements, and you know, maybe the message will be sent, using somebody as an example, wake everybody up again to this issue. But I do want to assure committee that it's not something we just turn a blind eye to. We've made significant improvements over the years, and there are some accommodation owners that we've never had a problem with again for many years. So it's a select few, but when something happens, we hear about it, and you know, a squeaky wheel sort of thing. So, but we will keep on it in cooperation with our bylaw.
Absolutely, and if I could just add through the chair as well, this particular property was inspected through the business license process on May 25th, and by fire department and by bylaw, and at that time there was only very minor infractions that were noted, which were repaired. We then went on Saturday night for this large party, and you see a completely different setup once it's operational. The nice part about this situation for us is we visited at 8 o'clock in the morning. Everybody was still at the cabins, so when we witnessed everybody being there, but this wasn't a case where these prom goers brought blow-up mattresses, and they added facilities within the buildings. These were permanent beds that were placed there by the property owner, and we have the evidence of it. So this one's fairly clear and cut of how we're going to deal with it. They're not always that easy to deal with. So we very clearly explained to this property owner that they need to find a way to manage it, whether it be additional security staff on site, because clearly it's not being managed at this time and people were hurt, unfortunately.
So just
Is there any other comments?
Yeah, just further to that. So that's the common complaint from the accommodation owners, is we had everything good. And you know, the smoke alarms were there and working, and as the deputy said, that was inspected, and that was, they come in, they take them down, they blow off the extinguishers, they do all that. So it really does come back to the owner though, to ensure that they have security measures there in place to make sure those things don't happen. Have extra smoke alarms and extinguishers on site, so that if that does happen, they can replace them and so on. So I understand their frustration, but they have to, it's their responsibility. They have to spend the money and get the security. That's really what it comes down to.
I guess my only last comment would be that it sounds like when extra beds were placed, then they have an understanding, especially after an inspection, that they were in violation. And you know, if you look at history of when these disasters happen, we were fortunate because there wasn't a fire or something else, but you hear about the nightclubs around the world that had 1,000 extra people in, and then it's a fire and then it's too late. Like, I mean, we're you know, the safety concern to our visitors, and obviously you know, the impact that would have on our town. So keep up the good work, and hopefully we can, I think if it's a blatant thing, we should make sure that we send a message. I have a motion by Is that Mayor Smith? Or is that, that's Bonnie? Okay. Moved by Bonnie Smith and seconded by Councillor Stockwell. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the June 2017 Fire Department Report for information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 3.4, consent agenda. And should I read this or do the list of what's pulled first? I guess you can read this. All items listed below will be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be removed from the consent resolution and considered immediately following adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. And there have been a number of items pulled. Wasaga Beach Candidates Celebration, Special Events Monthly Report, Earth Productions Proposed Events, and I believe, an Electric Element Fee Payment Proposal. Is there any other items that we... With that said, we have a resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Byfolchi and seconded by, oh, that's Mayor Smith. Thank you. Resolved that the Community Service Section of the Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the June 8, 2017 consent agenda items 3.4 to 3.4.3 and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Thank you. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, the first item for discussion was Wasaga Beach Canada Day celebration, RFP for SOP, and that, I believe, is Councillor Gray would like to speak to.
Thank you. Yeah, I was pleased to see that. I think it's exciting to have businesses across town getting involved with beachfront activities. My only concern was that they were saying 10% of the proceeds from alcohol sales will be donated to a charity of the town of Wasaga Beach's choice. And I wasn't sure how the town of Wasaga Beach would determine what charity the Beacon should be donating 10% of their alcohol sales to.
I haven't had a chance to meet with Guy or Taylor quite yet, so my first meeting with them is actually going to be tomorrow. So I can have some further discussion in regards to the charitable donation portion of the proposal I put forward.
And I guess if we have any comments at the table, mine would be that we push it back and it would be their charity of choice.
Okay.
Because I think it's kind of tough for us to pick one out of the many deserving charities in town.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Councillor Bray. I think it's great that we're seeing, again, business from other parts of town coming to the main end to take part in. And Guy Puccini has certainly been around a long, long time, and I'm sure he's going to do a phenomenal job at this. But I would agree that Guy, he's been around so long, he probably pushed this off to us because he didn't want to make that decision, but he give it back to him.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Just curious, how many businesses did apply? Did you say?
Two picked up the RFP package, only one submitted it in time though.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Eagle?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. As far as the donation goes, I think we're getting into a touchy situation here. I think that what I would like to see anyway, it's only my own opinion, is I would like to see it split up amongst certain organizations rather than pick one organization. I think that we're sort of centering somebody out that way, and I think I'd like to see it split up amongst a couple, or 2 or 3 different organizations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I believe that was the suggestion, was to put into the fund that we have for our charity grants. Was that my understanding or no?
No, just for clarity, that we push that back to Mr. Piccini, and that he determine his charity of choice rather than us having
Oh, I see, okay.
to make a decision, because there's many deserving charities in town. If it's like a lottery, people will approach him and say, hey, I have a great charity, support me.
Any other comments? Okay, the next item is special event, oh, sorry. We have to do each one. Okay, moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Stockwell. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that Guy Cassini and the Beacon Wasaga Beach Holdings Limited be awarded the Special Occasions Permit SOP for Saturday, July 1st, 2017 as part of the Town of Wasaga Beach Canada Day celebration.
Thank you, members of the committee. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith. In favor. Councillor Stockwell.
In favor.
Chair Boulanger. In favor. Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, the next item for discussion, special events monthly report, and again, this was Councillor Bray.
He was obviously on a roll yesterday. Yeah, great report, and it's good to see that things are happening. I just wanted to point out that this coming Saturday, my business is going up to Midland to attend the Butter Tart Festival. And this is a one-day event that is organized by the town. I believe it was started by a small group of citizens or business owners, and the town has taken it over. It's one day. They have over 15,000 people the first year. There's rumors that it's grown to 45,000. Like, it's a crazy, crazy day, but it's town sponsored, and I just wondered if maybe moving forward, special events would consider hosting our own event rather than constantly looking for other people to bring events to town. So I know it's probably a bigger discussion to have around the table, but I think that, you know, the town of Collingwood has Elvis, Aurelia has the Beatles. So there's different things you could have a festival around, and maybe rather than waiting for that magic event organizer to come to town, maybe tourism is our business. We should consider hosting our own events in the future to at least add to the calendars. Not sure, where it would go from here, but I wanted to throw it out there because that's what jumped out at me as we plan for the Butter Tart Festival.
Okay, Mayor Smith.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. The town of Midland took this over, and it is a phenomenal. It's one of my best days in business. Down in the main end, the Main Street area of Midland, and they do a super job. And I couldn't agree more as well that we really should be looking at hosting some of our own events. And I'm not sure that they won't be revenue generating as well, depending on the festival. And it's a great idea. So I support having a good discussion around this table about that.
Thank you, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we've talked about at the staff level was the updating of the special event strategy that was considered and adopted by council a few years ago now. So with the hiring of a new senior event coordinator and the reorganization and hiring of a new department head who starts next Monday, we think that the timing is good for the review and update of the special event strategy, and those comments that we've heard today could be incorporated as part of that review and update. So that would be the mechanism for it to come back for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Just one, I know there's some of, at least one existing event that we always thought the town would eventually take over, and I think that was Wasaga Beach Blues Festival, Stonebridge. And, you know, maybe look at some of the other ones that are out there that we can grow, or the town may look at taking more revenue purposes.
Thank you. Any other comments? I just had one comment in that, you know, it's kind of interesting with a butter tart, whether or not it was strategic. We hear about all of the concerns about competition, like certainly with a pastry or dessert or one element where if you happen to be in that business, you can participate in that day and still get all your sales. But it doesn't infringe on the main course and appetizers and those kind of things. So just in considering that I don't know if that was strategic to their plan, but certainly could be a consideration here in Wasaga Beach. So. Okay, moved by Mayor Smith and seconded by Councillor Eagle. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinating Committee received the main special event report for information.
Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Black-Bolton.
In favor?
Councillor Gray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
And the next item for discussion is earth production proposed events, and this item was pulled by Councillor Smith, Deputy Mayor, by Volke, myself, Mayor Smith, and Councillor Bragg. So I think maybe we'll start in reverse order. Councillor Smith, if you would like to start.
Yes, I had quite a long discussion with Angela about this, and I had some concerns because when I Googled earth production, I couldn't find anything. And I was also wondering if the references have been checked when you have, I think we got burned last year with the Aretha Franklin concert. Right up till the end, we didn't have signed contracts and it was pulled, way into the process. So I just wanted to make sure that if we go ahead with this, that we're comfortable the people dealing with are actually credible folks. That's all. Once bitten, twice shy.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My concern is more with the sports park itself. We are known for having best fields around, and I guess putting a Burles Creek type event out on there, I would have concerns with what would the risk be to that, what would the expense be after if we have to fix it, and the way the motion reads, it's the way I'm reading it. It sort of sounds like it's giving permission to go work with them for a 5-year term, subject to event organizers submitting an event application form and following the event consideration process. So to me, that's sort of saying, as long as you follow that process, you're in. I myself would be comfortable supporting staff going back and talking and working through more details. I'm not comfortable approving this the way it reads if that's the intent. I think that there's a lot to consider. And really, what is the value to bringing this to town? If they're all there camping, are they leaving there and eating here? Are they doing other things? Or are they just kind of there, Burles Creek, they pile in there and they spend the weekend? And so what is the true benefit and what is the risk to our sports park?
Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the deputy. I think I certainly wouldn't be prepared to agree today to approve this in principle or any other manner, but I think we do need to let staff have the time to get out, meet with this proponent, have some real serious conversation, do some background checks, so on and so forth, and report back appropriately to committee as to, you know, exactly what this does entail and exactly what is going to be expected here. I have no issue with them using the sports park. I have an issue with them if they're going to be doing any damage to our fields, so on and so forth. And so I think it would need to be, you know, mapped out clearly as to what areas are usable and what areas aren't. And if there's any cost to that, that would be borne by this particular Earth Productions. I'll share that I did meet on an occasion with the gentleman from Earth Productions, along with Joshua Palace, and he certainly seemed to know what he was doing, but we made it very clear this would have to come to committee and/or council, and then go back and sit down and have those conversations with him. I think it's a great opportunity, but there's a lot of work to be done yet.
CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify the event consideration process, and I understand what the Deputy Mayor was saying, but just to reiterate that the tail end of that process is review and consideration by this committee, and then if committee deems it appropriate, ultimately by council. So that's the last two steps in that, but as committee can appreciate, there's many more steps to go before that would happen, and a production of this magnitude would take a significant amount of time, logistical time to organize. So before staff embarked on that, staff wanted to get some direction from committee. If this is something that's worth pursuing, then staff would pursue it and go through the process, which includes back to this table. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
So what you are confirming is that by approving this, we're just saying go talk to them. That's it.
Go talk to them. There's lots of work to be done. Bring it back here.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Bray, you had...
I did. I guess my first comment was it'd just be nice to hear a little bit more about the Burroughs Creek experience. Obviously in the media we read the negatives. There was probably some positives. It would be nice to maybe talk to the Burroughs Creek Council, just to see what happened in their area, again to determine what the value to the town would be. And then just to throw it out there, we own a lot of land out at the Sparks Park. You know, maybe it doesn't have to be our soccer fields. Maybe there's something a little further over that could be developed for events like this, and it could be a great setup that we could play side by side. But yeah, I'd just like to hear a little bit more about Burroughs Creek as well.
Councilor Stockwell?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to come forward with the rest of the council to say that I was the one who kind of reached out for this gentleman in the capacity of the beach. And I was looking for somebody that might be interested in coming down to the beach and during the course of the season would put on specific shows, etc., etc. I've known this chap before in another life that I led, and they are very experienced, and I don't think anybody is going to be disappointed by their experience in this regard. Specifically, on my discussions with the promoter, he clearly understands that, because I think staff made it quite clear to them that you can't touch the soccer fields, you can't touch the baseball fields, but there's lots of land down there other than that, plus the fact that there are adjoining neighborhood lands that you could reach out and lease for whatever. This is a big organization. This type of a show is not the Aretha Franklin thing. This will bring in top entertainers to Wasaga Beach, and will be televised worldwide. There's money to be made by the municipality once the negotiations get serious. I think what you hit it on the head today is simply a case of saying, look, if you don't like this, if you think you're going to kill it today. Save everybody a lot of work. However, if you think that there is a potential and there's a good reason to do the project, then some of the concerns of the promoter are laid out in the bylaw, etc., etc. But all I see we're doing today is saying to staff, okay, go at it, have a go, and report back at an early date and tell us what you find out. And I think when they report back to tell us what they found out, we're going to be quite pleased that this guy knows what he's doing, and there could be a good revenue stream for the municipality, much larger than one ever thought it would be because of the town. This is not a Burroughs Creek. This is not a Burroughs Creek. This is something much. When they talk about executive camping, they bring in these $50,000 trailers that individuals have, and that's camping. And they have an area for them, and goes from there. So I think I moved the motion, Mr. Chairman, because I think it's a good step in the right direction to have staff go with the promoter, get the questions, the answers that have been raised today, plus others, and report back in a timely manner, and then carry on from there. So I'm certainly going to support it, and then I moved it, and I think it's a good step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments? I also had pulled this item, and my only concern was that you know, that we really work on the mechanism when we have a buy ticket revenue generation for the town, that we need to tighten that up a little bit. I think that'll come up later in the agenda, but that we ensure, like, we're talking very large numbers of people, and certainly the potential revenue for the town and is extensive. And also, you know, to your point, Councillor Stockwell, that it can put Wasaga Beach on the map with the level of entertainment that these people draw. And reading through that, you know, most of the entertainment was looked like the kind of entertainment we were looking for, certainly country western and others, so it was very positive, so thank you. And with that, we have a motion that is moved by Councillor Stockwell. Oh, sorry, that was, well, yes it is, and seconded by Councillor Eagle. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinating Committee recommend to Council that it provide direction to the Special Events Coordinator to work with organizations of earth production to bring 3 large-scale events to the Wasaga Beach Sports Park for a 5-year term commencing in 2018, subject to the event organizers submitting an event application form and following the event consideration process.
Thank you. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favorite.
Chair Belanger.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
You did a good job. We got unanimous.
Okay, and the last item for discussion for Community Service Section is electric element fee payment proposal. And this was pulled by Mayor Smith, myself, Councillor Smith, and Councillor Bray. And we'll start with Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly don't support reducing these fees in any way, shape, or form. I have attended this festival now for, I think, going on 3 years. This is my 3rd year, and I attended this festival on 2 occasions this year, and there were a substantial amount of people there. I don't think it was as busy perhaps per day as a single day events have been in the past, but it was certainly busy. And quite frankly, I'm looking at the numbers here, 3,568. And do we know what the cost of a ticket was for this event?
I have it upstairs in my notes.
Is it 100, 150?
For the 2 day, it was 100. I think it was 120. 127. Yeah, 127.
And a single day?
I think 86.
86. So if we round that out at $100, we're looking at 3,568 tickets sold. Now I recall very clearly being told in the past that the headliners for these events are often for an hour $250,000 plus dollars. So when I look at 2 events, and I think they had somewhere around 12 or 14 DJs or whatever they're called. If the headliner is $250,000, I mean, these people they have a lot of debt in their hands right now, there's no doubt in my mind. And so I guess the bottom line is I'm struggling with the numbers here. My understanding was, if I'm not mistaken, that we were to receive 50% of this payment 2 weeks prior to the show, and I don't think that happened. And I'd certainly like to know why. And you know, my understanding was also that these tickets were to be sold through a reputable ticket agency. However, I can tell you that the Wednesday of the event and leading up to and including the event, there were signs down and around the main beach area where tickets were for sale. So how do we track those tickets? And I can tell you, I personally saw a heck of a lot more than 3,568 people there. Now they say they gave away somewhere around, I think the number is 1,600 tickets. I still believe there was more people there than that, and I don't know how you could sustain this event if you're only making $368,000. Best case scenario, when your headliners are $250,000. So I'm struggling with the numbers, and I certainly cannot and will not support reducing the fee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
I have the same concerns, exactly. I feel like they sort of came to us and said, we'll work with you, and what do you want? And we agreed. Council agreed. And I just feel that I'm going to ask Angela, is it the $10,675.94 we would expect from him?
Yes.
So, and I think that we need to get that returned to us. So that's where I stand on this. And I do question 1,600 tickets being compensated. That's an awful lot for an event. And look at the revenue. If they're losing revenue, 1,600 tickets is, you know, a lot of money. So to give away. So that's all my comment is. I would offer an amendment to the motion if I could this time. Is that correct, Mr. CAO? I can offer an amendment to the motion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you may.
Okay. Is the recommendation, Community Service Section of Coordinate Committee recommends to Council that accept a payment of $5,473 from the organizers of the Electric Element event, and take off the last the last part of that sentence, because it's where it sounds like that's a final payment, and we could change the payment number to the 10,000. So it's make an amendment. If anyone agrees, so.
Mr. Chair, if I may just ask, where would you put the period? Where would be the new location?
From the organizers of the Electric Elements event, period.
Okay.
And then change the 5,400. Well, they're offering us 5,400, right? So we can take what they've offered, but we need to word it so that we get the rest.
Yeah, so the full amount, that's.
Yes.
Excuse me, just for clarification, if we defeat this motion, it goes back to the full amount. So I think we can just vote on this motion instead of amending it.
Well, the only thing is, if we vote on this motion, we're saying that we're accepting that as the total amount.
Right, but if it's defeated, it goes back to the full amount.
No, you have to have a new motion.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity, the council's already indicated in terms of the fee that would be a portion for this particular project. So if this motion were defeated, it would revert back to what council had already established as the fee, which would have been the $10,675.94. So that was the fee.
Okay. So I don't think there's a signature on this because did we find someone to? There's no.
There is a mover and seconder.
There is a mover now?
Mayor Smith?
I'm struggling a bit here, Mr. Chair, and maybe you or someone can help me, but we haven't even had the full discussion here, so we don't know if this is going to be defeated or not. No. So I would suggest we finish the discussion, right. And then if there's going to be an amendment, that we make that amendment.
That was my intent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think there's two questions here. One, the amount that staff is recommending, and then the second one is the amount that they are suggesting based on the number of ticket sales. And then there's a third position that I think the mayor's touched on, was that he's not very happy with the second position, that they only sold this many tickets. And I think that's a fair concern. And I think I would certainly defeat the resolution that we're doing, but refer the matter back to staff and don't tie them down for any number, and say that there has to be some more investigation, forensic audit, whatever you want to call it, into the substantiation of the numbers that they said they had. Because that may or may not be correct. So however you want to, I would yield to the CAO on this type of thing, because he's the wordsmith around here. And I think that the resolution probably should be that we to accept their amount, there's the amount of the larger amount as a partial payment. Carry out a more investigation as to the numbers, and then report back to the committee.
Any additional comments?
Yeah,
Councillor Bray?
I had pulled this too. I supported the staff recommendation for the simple reason at the end of the report, the rationale made a lot of sense to me. So staff said the writer is recommending council consider this option based on the original fee schedule that was approved by this council. Under the schedule, the ticket surcharge fee for a medium scale event is $1 per ticket. The original ticket surcharge fee was to have been taken into consideration. The event organizers would only have been required to pay $3,568 plus the rental fee for a total of $5,472.50. When the event came before this council, there was discussion that some supported, or a discussion and a decision. Some supported, some didn't, and we upped that $1 per ticket, and we made an exception for one event to charge them more per ticket than any other event that we're hosting this year in the beach. So for me, we already were treating this event differently than our fee schedule that we had approved, and I think we should go back to it because it's precedent setting when we make those changes, and things like this happen because we changed the rules for one guy. So we changed the rule already, and now he's saying, well, hey, it didn't work for me, so you changed it. Let's go back to how it should have been. And I think he probably has a case we should listen to. If his ticket sales numbers aren't accurate, that's another issue, and we should certainly look into that, because we also talked about how do we know that he's telling us the truth. We should have had something in place. If we didn't, then what evidence does he have for his ticket sales? But I do think we should probably be at the $1, not at the $2 and the $4, because that's our published special event ticket price.
Mayor Smith?
Thank you. I agree with both Councillor Bray and Councillor Stockwell that perhaps we should be looking further into these numbers and getting some backup as to what it is they say. I mean, the one thing we can do is we could request that they provide us with a report from the ticket company they use to sell online tickets to show us what that number was. How we're ever going to find out what they sold on site or whatever, I mean, I have no idea. I asked the question the first day how that would be done. Nobody had any idea how that was going to be calculated. So again, that's I guess that's a breakdown on our part. But with respect to the $1, $3 or $4, at the end of the day, when that decision was made by this council, this operator accepted that. They didn't push it back. They didn't say no. They accepted that. And they agreed to it, and they moved on with their event. And had they come before the event and pushed back, we could have debated that then. But now that the event is over, we're not sure the amount of tickets were sold. I quite frankly just don't believe these numbers, if I'm being very, very frank. And to come back after the event and say we didn't make any money, so we just want to pay you half, for me that doesn't cut it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one more is that these tickets that they used for the ticket company, and I agree with what's being said around the table, there would be no refunds on those tickets, if I'm right. So blaming the weather and whatever is, to me, is not an excuse, because these tickets were supposed to be prepaid, and whether you showed or not, you paid for your ticket. So I agree. I think we need to really look into that, and tickets at the door, as well as the tickets that were sold during the week down at the beachfront. So.
There's no other comments. I also pulled this item, and I have a number of comments. I seem to recollect very vividly that this organization was very motivated to continue this event in Wasaga Beach. I don't think they did that because they've been unprofitable in the past. Within a week of the event, they were posting all over Facebook that they were 97% sold out. That could have been a marketing strategy to get people to get those last tickets, but nonetheless, they were claiming success. In relationship to our guideline for the amount paid to the town from an event, I seem to recollect that that was a guideline. We have events that are $5, we have events that are $25, we have events that are $120 or $140, and to suggest they should all be treated the same, I think that's why we looked at it, and that's why we as a council passed a decision, and I agree with the mayor that they agreed to that. They have consistently told us the multi-millions of dollars that they inject into the economy, and that their production is well over $1 million. And you know, if a 1 year $5,000 or more, depending on what we come out as the actual ticket sales, is a determining factor for them, I question that. So I again would support that we do investigation, that we certainly collect the full amount as a partial payment, and also to go back to staff and understand why we did not get the advance payment that they had agreed upon. So, and if you'd like to comment on that, that would be great. So, would you like to,
Yeah,
Councillor Stockwell?
I'd like to speak again, if I may.
Yes.
I don't want people to go away from here today saying council is suggesting that they weren't being honest. That's not the issue. The issue is the numbers don't seem to jive. And there's nothing wrong. I think it's a good business practice to be able to say, okay, we agreed on this number based on you giving us a report on the number of tickets sold. The recommendation I would support would be pay this number that we agreed upon. However, the matter's not closed, that they want, the staff wants to sit down, and also wants staff to sit down with the promoters and do a further investigation as to the handling of the tickets, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's doing business the way business should be done, and especially in this industry. There's nothing new with doing a forensic audit on your ticket sales. That's the motion, and I'm not too sure if you have that motion before you, Mr. Secretary, that what we spoke of, that we take the higher amount today, but make it clear that that's not the end of the discussion, that staff is going to sit down with the promoters and do a further investigation as to justification on the ticket numbers that are being presented. Now, if you haven't got that motion in front of you, I would move that amendment, if I got a second.
Same amendment.
This is just the motion to refer. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we have a draft motion prepared that Councillor Smith had alluded to. It has not been moved or seconded. Subsequent to that motion, being proposed, we have a second motion here. Because this motion hasn't been moved, hasn't been seconded, it's just a formality for the mover to second it. It's up to the mover whether she wants this motion to be considered first, or would you like to see if you have a seconder, or take it back?
Okay, I'd like to know the difference between the two, and also I think the mayor has his hand up.
This
one more comment.
This motion is to amend the motion that's
Right.
before committee to change the figure from the figure that was recommended to the 10,000 figure, and deleting that section after where you asked that the period be
Right.
placed. So that's an amending motion.
Right.
The motion that Councillor Stockwell asked to be prepared deals with the referral back to staff, but in the interim, that the town accept the amount that the event promoter is required to pay, and that further investigation be undertaken.
So I'd be happy to withdraw mine. I think that Mr. Stockwell's motion,
Mayor Smith?
Mr. Chair, I respect all the comments and the amendments to the motion put on the table here today, but I'm not so sure that we're not going to be throwing good money after bad, for lack of a better term, because at the end of the day, we can probably track how many tickets were sold through the ticket agency. But we are never going to be able to track, I don't believe, how many tickets were sold at restaurants and bars and clubs or wherever the heck they may have been sold. So, we could be sending our staff off here, spending good money after bad, to find something that they're just not going to be able to find. I would be fine personally if we left it as is. I'm not prepared to support a reduction. The amount that staff have come to us with and say that this is the amount owing is the amount owing, and we cut our losses, and I hope we've learned from this experience, and we'll tighten up how we track these types of things in future. But I just don't know that we're going to come back with anything different after time. Staff have spent the time that they'll spend it. And if we're really going to look into this, it's going to be significant time, no doubt in my mind. So how far do we want to go with that? How much do we want to spend to probably get nothing else? Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment?
No, I'll just wait for the motion.
Okay, I guess I would just only add to that I would think that what was sold out of Ticketmaster would be fairly readily available, and that at least we would have an understanding if the difference between what was sold from Ticketmaster and what we collected was a reasonable amount of tickets. If Ticketmaster added up and there was only 5 tickets sold locally, I think we would be pretty reasonably assured that the numbers didn't jive. And again, I agree with Councillor Stockwell that it could have just been an error. It may not have been deliberate, but at least it would give us some kind of quick reference to say, does it seem reasonable?
And if I may, that's my point. We can readily, easily probably get, well, we can't, but we could ask the promoter here to supply that number, that invoice, whatever it is. I'm sure they get invoiced or from the ticket company, and I don't think it's Ticketmaster in this case. But other than that, I don't know how else we will determine what else was sold. So if that's what we want, that's fairly, I think, hopefully fairly simple to get. But other than that, I don't know how far we want to go down this rabbit hole.
And just for clarification too, this event will now go to the new Beachfront Management Corporation, but council is dealing with this one. But for future years, that would come through the Beachfront Management to council with your recommendations. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, I think with that said, we have a motion.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think we need to clarify this. There's no recommendation required, as I understand it, from the Board of Management. They have the delegated authority to approve or disapprove.
Okay, moved by Councillor Stockwell and seconded by Councillor Eagle. Item 341D, 3, III. Okay. Electric element fee payment proposal. Be it resolved that the Consolidated Committee refer item 3.4.1 P3 3, to staff for further review and a follow-up report, and further, that the event organizer be required to pay $10,675.94, and that staff discuss with the promoter the ticket sales to confirm the number sold. I think we're,
I'm allowed to ask a question.
I would,
Am I not?
Yes. Pardon me, Mr. Chair, sorry, there was a section that had just been added there that you skipped over.
very tiny, sorry.
Yeah, that little part there, so it's has it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That the 10,675.94 as an interim amount, and that staff discussed with promoter the ticket sales to confirm the number sold. Are we allowed another comment prior to the vote?
Yes. Now the motion's been read.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say I will be voting against it. I think if we're sending it back to staff, I don't think we should have a number in here at this point. So for those reasons, I will be voting against it.
No, I'm good.
No.
Okay.
It's not all about you.
Okay, I didn't see other hands, so, okay, who had their hand up first? Mayor
Thank you,
Smith?
Mr. Chair. Just clarity on the question. So is this, am I hearing that they are going to be required to pay the $10,674.94 now? And once staff have determined if any other tickets are sold, they'll be required to pay the difference then. But that amount is due and payable now, correct?
That's not a
Thank
motion,
you.
sir.
Any, Councilor
My
Bray?
comment was just that we're investing more time in this, and we had talked about ticket sales are what ticket sales are. Obviously, the numbers they gave to Angela came from somewhere. Saw something that made her write this report with those numbers. So I'm not going to support sending it back for staff to do more on electric elements. It's over, it's done. Let's work on next year.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, so it's a good point. So if I may, through you to Angela, did you receive an invoice or something from the ticket company that's proving these numbers or showing these numbers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did receive, not necessarily from the ticket agency, it was a report, because I asked the organizer to send me the details of the ticket agency as well as tickets sold on site and through other areas. So he had generated a document that is where I got the chart from. And then I just amended the document a little bit to include the numbers that we assigned to each ticket.
So, but this is his document. You have no documentation. I want to be clear on this, Mr. Chair. You have no documentation from the ticket corporation included in his package that says we sold X amount of tickets.
The documentation that I have from the organizer does not specify exactly where the numbers came from. It just has the heading of each, basically each section of tickets. So there's no logo or letterhead or any of that I would expect to be on a ticket agency report from ElectroStub.
So the company is ElectroStub?
That's who sold the online.
So we have nothing from ElectroStub included in his package that would be an invoice or whatever it is, a chart of accounts.
No. My
in his
understanding
package.
is that he combined the ElectroStub stuff with the tickets they sold online and in the stores.
But they're his numbers.
They're his numbers.
Okay, thank you.
If there's any other comments, did we request validation from the?
I asked him to send me the report from ElectroStub as well as the reports from the other agencies, and I got the one document.
So, sorry, Mr. Chair, to belabor this. So you requested a report from DocuStub? ElectroStub, and he didn't provide that. He simply gave you a number.
But I asked him to provide the other details as well. So my understanding from my conversation with him is he took the numbers from ElectroStub as well as the numbers from on-site and in stores and combined them into one easy-to-read document for us.
I'm trying being helpful.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get a simple answer, I think, to a simple question, with all due respect. We have nothing from, what's the company? ElectroStub. Specifically that says we sold this many tickets.
No.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the motion that's on the table?
Thank you, members of the committee. Having heard the motion, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Opposed?
Councillor Bray.
Opposed.
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Chair Boulanger?
In favor.
Thank you. Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 5 in favor, 2 opposed.
Is there anything I have to do to adjourn?
Oh, I said,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
we're going to take a recess.
We'll take now a,
So we don't have time.
sorry,
10 minutes.
10-minute recess and come back at